I'll try and speak as loudly and clearly as I can. I'm aware that there's a rain to compete with. I'd like to begin by saying it's a real honor to be here, and I feel almost embarrassed to be talking in front of all these Rinpoche Las, Lama Las, Ani Las, all the monastics. It's a real honor. Thank you so much for listening to me in some small way. A summary of what I'm going to talk about is how I've been trying to, over the last 8 years, to offer the essence of the dream yoga, lucid dreaming teachings to Western minds at the request of my teacher, Lama Yeshe Rinpoche. Just so I stay on time, I'm going to set my timer, so then none of us have to worry. Okay, so I have been practicing lucid dreaming, which is the art of becoming conscious within your dreams. So a lucid dream is a dream where you know that you're dreaming as the dream is happening. So you're in the dream, you're not awake, you are asleep, but in the dream, you go, aha, I'm dreaming. Recognition of the dream state. Now, once you know that you're dreaming, there is the ability to direct the dream at will. Some people use the word control. I prefer to use the word direct and to choreograph. We're working with the mind rather than against it, I believe. So I learned to do this when I was quite young, at the age of 16. I just bought lots of books. I'd been very interested in lucid dreaming since a little bit younger. But at that age of 16, I wasn't into Dharma. I hadn't met the teachings yet, so I was just using lucid dreaming for fun. I would go skateboarding, I would fly through the sky, and I would meet pretty women in the lucid dream state. We'll say no more about that in front of my monastic friends. This is until I met my teacher, Lama Yeshe Rinpoche, Lama Yeshe Rinpoche, who is the abbot of Samye Ling Monastery in Scotland. And when I met Lama Yeshe Rinpoche, he started giving me instructions on the dream yoga teachings and how to use the lucid dream state for spiritual practice. He would encourage me that once I was lucid, I should try meditating within the lucid dream. He would encourage me to try and practice the yidam practices within the lucid dream state, to recite the mantras within the lucid dream state. And most importantly, he said that if you learn to practice within the lucid dream state, you can learn to be more awake, more aware, and more kind in your daily life, in this shared dream. And I think that's even possibly more important than some of the more profound applications. So, by the time I was in my mid-20s, I was what I like to call a sleep geek. I was obsessed with lucid dreaming, with sleep, with dream yoga. I would go to anyone who was teaching on it, read all the books on it. I was young, arrogant, as I probably still am, and tried all of these practices. But luckily, I did have the guidance of Lama Yeshe Rinpoche, who guided me on the correct path. When I was 25, Lama Yeshe Rinpoche decided that it would be a good idea for me to share some of these techniques that I'd been using to other Western minds. So he asked me to start giving little talks and workshops at the Kagyu centres in London and around Europe. So this was very strange because I was 25 years old and had now received this authorization to teach lucid dreaming and just the basic dream yoga practices to Western minds under the guidance of Lama Yeshe and my refuge Lama, the late Akon Rinpoche, who we pray for his swift rebirth very soon. Now, my only instruction 8 years ago, this was, from Lama Yeshe was, teach what you know. Help people to recognize the dream state and to use the nighttime for practice. Now, at the time I started teaching, I realized that there were some Westerners who had been exposed to lucid dreaming practices, but this was mainly within what I euphemistically call the Western hedonistic school. This was people using lucid dreaming to act like they were in the Matrix, to fly about, to engage ego fantasies, and of course, as I found out in my teenage years, to engage sexual fantasy. I realized that there was a lot of work to do in trying to transpose these teachings for spiritual practice, not just for worldly aims. Of course, dream yoga was available to Westerners in my lineage, but it was almost exclusively contained to those who'd done the 3 or 4 year retreat as part of the 6 yogas of Naropa. But I'd been told to teach what I know, so I knew that wasting your lucid dream practice on worldly aims wasn't going to get far. But if you use your lucid dreaming for spiritual practice while you sleep, psychological integration, working with nightmares and healing trauma, and exploration of the empty nature and pure potentiality of the mind's projections, these could have life-changing results. Just to expand on these a little bit more, the spiritual practice while you sleep. When I started teaching, it wasn't just Buddhists that I was teaching. Of course, Buddhists would come and I would give them the teachings Lama Yeshe had offered me to practice the Yidam practice within the dream, do your meditation within the lucid dream. But I also encountered Christians, Sufis, Muslims, who also were learning these practices. And one Christian man from America, he had a profound experience through lucid dreaming, where he called out to meet Jesus, and his internal projection of Jesus arrived, and he had a very powerful experience, which he said really grounded his Christian practice. And he wrote me an email and said, "Charlie, be sure to tell people that these lucid dreaming practices are not just for Buddhists. They can truly benefit Buddhists and Christians alike." So there's a very interesting expansion there, I think, for other traditions. Psychological integration, so working with nightmares and healing trauma. There's a lot of Western science that has been done on this, which shows that lucid dreaming is one of the most effective treatments for post-traumatic stress. Just next month, I believe, or perhaps the month later, at Samye Ling Monastery in Scotland, I'll be part of a retreat for ex-soldiers. So this is ex-members of the armed forces from Britain. Apparently up to 80% of them are suffering from post-traumatic stress, terrible nightmares of being back in Afghanistan, being back in Iraq. And we hope to be able to use these lucid dreaming practices to help work with their nightmares. Because of course, if you can become lucid within the nightmare and know, I'm not really back in Iraq, I am dreaming that I'm back in Iraq, and this is my mind's display, then that alone can have large healing consequences for the dreamer involved. Exploration of the empty nature and pure potentiality of the mind's projections. I know so little about this, but I can tell you for any Westerners there who struggle with this concept, when the great Rinpoche, the Lamas, are talking about the empty nature of the mind, to have a lucid dream, to be in the dream knowing, I am dreaming, my body is asleep in bed, right now I'm experiencing the projection of my own mind, and then to go and touch a solid object, to place your hand on a wall and to feel the bricks, to feel the concrete, to feel the dust coming off your fingers, but knowing this wall is made of my mind, this is all a projection of the mind, can be very helpful in understanding a tiny bit more about this truth of the pure potentiality of the mind's projections. So, this is what I've tried to spend the last 8 years doing, teaching lucid dreaming for spiritual and psychological growth to Buddhists and non-Buddhists alike. This is how I developed what I now call mindfulness of dream and sleep. The aim of the mindfulness of dream and sleep approach was to offer accessible and effective lucid dreaming techniques presented in a Western terminology for Buddhists and non-Buddhists alike, but containing the essence of the dream yoga teachings to use the dreaming and sleep states for spiritual practice. Now, to do this, I soon discovered, in discussions with my meditation teacher, Rob Nairn, who is the representative of the Karma Kagyu lineage in Africa. I know he doesn't look like an African, but he was born in Zimbabwe, so he is African born and bred. He realized that we needed to create a new vocabulary around these teachings in order to present them to Westerners in the most accessible way. So for the first year or so, I was teaching alongside Rob Nairn to make sure I didn't say anything too stupid. And we realized that we were missing a trick. One night, Rob Nairn said to me, "Charlie, how many hours do we spend dreaming a night?" And I said, from a scientific point of view, about 2.5 hours, based on an average 8-hour sleep cycle. And he turned to me and said, "Okay, so what about the other 5.5 hours? What can people do in those states?" And it was trying to answer that question that I developed some of the practices that we now term as mindfulness of dream and sleep, trying to allow people to bring meditative awareness not just into the dream state, but into all the stages of sleep and dream for highest benefit. So just a quick brief on the scientific medical view of the sleep cycles, which actually correspond almost exactly with the Tibetan view of the 4 main sleep cycles. But of course, these are the Western terms being given here. So we have the awake state, the hypnagogic state. This is the state of falling asleep. So if I get a bit boring and go over my time, some of you may start to do that, where your eyes close and you start to drift out. Then we have light sleep into deep sleep, REM dreaming sleep, rapid eye movement, and then the hypnopompic state, which is that state of waking up, that fresh mind that wakes up every morning. So what we wanted to do was to see if we could create a practice for each one of these sleep states. So, what can we teach Westerners to practice in the waking state? This was mindfulness meditation. So we focused on a basic shine and shamatha as a way to train the mind to be more lucidly engaged in the daytime. Because of course the original lucid dreaming technique is meditation. If we can be mindful, if we can be aware in the waking state, that flows over into the dream state naturally. And of course Buddha himself, although to find direct teachings of dream yoga is rare, we can find Buddha himself in the Pali Vinaya telling his monks to fall asleep in a state of mindfulness as a way to avoid impurities in sleep and nightmares as well. So it seems like the Buddha himself was encouraging us to fall asleep in a state of mindfulness and lucidity. We then find the hypnagogic mindfulness. So this is training people to fall asleep consciously. So the mind doesn't have to black out when we fall asleep. And of course we find this in the dream yoga teachings absolutely. Then conscious sleeping. So this is the practice of moving into dreamless sleep but still maintaining consciousness. Just a point on the hypnagogic meditation here as well. We have hypnagogic mindfulness, which is similar to the yoga nidra teaching that some of you might come across. Conscious sleeping practices, of course the lucid dreaming practices inspired by dream yoga, and hypnopompic mindfulness. So this is the process of waking up in a state of meditation. So as soon as the mind wakes up, rather than engaging discursive thoughts, coming straight into the state of meditation, whether it's guru yoga or whatever that is. And that's actually inspired by a Dzogchen practice, which roughly translates as waking from sleep meditation. So engaging the meditation mind as soon as we engage wakeful awareness. You'll see something here, the clear light. I'll be well out of my depth if I start talking about that, and I only have a few minutes on the clock. But if any students come to me and they are looking to engage the clear light practices, then I send them to my teacher because I don't have the ability to offer anything on that as of yet. So, one more. The lucid living, inspired by the illusory body yoga practices, encouraging people to see their daily experience as more dreamlike, less solid, more as a projection of mind, has been really helpful in people, especially working with Westerners who are locked into depression. That's been very helpful. So, as I come to my conclusion, it's really important to note that the techniques I'm offering are not a homogenization of the practices that inspired them. I truly believe that the ancient dream yoga practices should not be watered down to accommodate Western minds. There are the dream yoga practices, and then there are the mindfulness of dream and sleep practices which I am offering, which are like the very basic beginner foundation practices which will allow people to recognize the dream if they choose to move on to the advanced dream yoga practices at a later date. But I hope that instead, and at least my motivation was to create, a set of practices inspired by and containing the essence of the dream yoga practices, which offer Westerners access to the powerful benefits of these ancient Vajrayana teachings through a new modern paradigm. Has that been achieved? I don't know. But at the moment, over the past 8 years, we've offered these teachings in more than 20 countries, and Westerners have learnt to recognize the dreaming mind. So the practices do seem to be able to be taught, and they seem to be engaging these practices and working in the lucid dream state for psychological and spiritual growth. So I believe that can be of some small benefit to Western practitioners and perhaps beyond. Finally, live kindly and dream lucidly. Thank you so much.